What happens when Hollywood's most enigmatic leading man meets late-night television's most provocative host? The answer is a confrontation so intense that it left studio executives scrambling, audience members stunned, and one A-list actor storming, offset in what insiders are calling the most dramatic talk show meltdown in recent memory. Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because you're about to witness something that nobody saw coming. The tension started building the moment Ryan Gosling walked onto the Jimmy Kimmel live stage. What should have been a routine promotional appearance for his latest film quickly transformed into something much more personal, much more volatile. The studio audience, expecting their usual dose of light-hearted banter and carefully orchestrated celebrity charm, instead found themselves witnessing what felt like watching two titans of their respective crafts engage in psychological warfare. Jimmy Kimmel, known for his ability to disarm even the most guarded celebrities with his seemingly innocent questions and self-deprecating humor, seemed particularly energized that evening. His research team had clearly done their homework, and there was something in his demeanor that suggested this interview would be different from the standard promotional circuit appearances that Gosling had been making all week. "So Ryan," Kimmel began, settling back in his chair with that trademark smirk that his audience had come to know and love, "I've been thinking about something ever since your people confirmed you'd be coming on the show." The studio lights caught, the gleam in his eyes as he leaned forward slightly. "You know, for someone who's built a career on being the strong, silent type, you sure do pick some interesting projects to break that silence." Gosling, dressed in his characteristic understated style, a simple black jacket over a white t-shirt, shifted almost imperceptibly in his chair. Those who knew his mannerisms well might have recognized the subtle tightening around his eyes, the way his jaw set just a fraction differently. But to the casual observer, he appeared as composed as ever. "That's an interesting way to put it, Jimmy," Gosling replied, his voice carrying that familiar soft-spoken quality that had made him a favorite among directors looking for actors who could convey volumes without saying much. "Though I'm curious what you mean by breaking silence. I've always been pretty selective about the stories I want to tell." Kimmel's grin widened. "Oh, I think you know exactly what I mean. See, I've been doing this show for over 20 years now, Ryan. I've sat across from hundreds of actors, maybe thousands. And there's usually a pattern to how these conversations go. But you're different. You come in here, you give these perfect measured responses, you're charming in that mysterious way of yours, and then you disappear back into whatever private world you inhabit between films." The audience chuckled, but there was something in Kimmel's tone that suggested he wasn't entirely joking. Gosling's expression remained neutral, but his posture straightened slightly. "I appreciate the compliment," Gosling said, "though I'm not sure I follow where you're going with this." "Here's where I'm going with it," Kimmel continued, his voice taking on a slightly sharper edge. "I think you've gotten so good at playing characters who are emotionally unavailable that you've forgotten how to be genuine in real conversations. And I think that's what makes people so fascinated by you. This sense that there's something you're not telling us." The studio fell noticeably quieter. This wasn't the usual celebrity roasting that Kimmel was known for. This felt more pointed, more personal. Gosling's eyes narrowed slightly, and for the first time since sitting down, he looked directly at Kimmel without the practiced politeness that typically characterized his public appearances. "That's quite an assumption to make about someone you've just met," Gosling replied, his voice still soft but carrying a new undertone that hadn't been there moments before. "You're essentially suggesting that I'm being dishonest with your audience." "Am I wrong?" Kimmel shot back immediately. "Because from where I'm sitting, it feels like you're performing right now. Even this conversation, even your reaction to what I just said, it all feels very calculated, very controlled." The tension in the studio was becoming palpable. Audience members were exchanging glances, unsure whether they were witnessing planned television drama or something genuinely unscripted. unfolding before their eyes. The cameramen, following their instincts honed by years of live television, kept their focus tight on both men, capturing every micro-expression. Gosling leaned back in his chair, and for a moment it seemed like he might deflect with humor or redirect the conversation back to safer territory. Instead, he did something that surprised everyone in the studio. "You know what, Jimmy?" he said, his voice gaining strength and clarity. "You're absolutely right. I am performing. We're all performing. You're performing right now, trying to create a moment for your show. Your audience is performing, laughing, and reacting on cue. The difference is, I'm honest about it." Kimmel's expression shifted. This wasn't going according to whatever script he might have had in mind. "Honest about it? Really? Because it seems to me like you hide behind these characters you play, like you're afraid to let people see who you really are." "And who do you think I really am, Jimmy?" Gosling asked, his tone now carrying a challenge that made the studio atmosphere even more electric. "Because you seem to have some pretty strong opinions about someone whose work you clearly don't understand." "I understand it fine," Kimmel replied, his own voice rising slightly. "What I don't understand is why someone with your talent seems so determined to keep everyone at arm's length. It's like you're allergic to genuine human connection." The accusation hung in the air like a challenge. Gosling stared at Kimmel for a long moment, and something shifted in his expression. The carefully maintained composure that had defined his public persona for years began to crack, revealing something raw underneath. "You want genuine human connection?" Gosling asked, his voice taking on an edge that no one in the studio had heard from him before. "Let's talk about genuine human connection, Jimmy. Let's talk about how you make a living by inviting people onto your show and then trying to embarrass them for entertainment. Let's talk about how you've built your career on making other people uncomfortable while hiding behind the pretense of comedy." The words hit Kimmel like a physical blow. For someone who had spent decades perfecting the art of staying in control during live television, the host found himself genuinely taken aback. The studio audience, which had been nervously chuckling through the escalating tension, fell completely silent. You could hear the hum of the cameras, the whisper of the air conditioning, even the distant sound of traffic outside the Hollywood studio. Kimmel's face flushed, and for the first time in the interview, his practiced composure cracked. "That's rich coming from someone who's made millions playing the same brooding character in every single movie," he fired back, his voice losing its television-friendly modulation. "At least I'm upfront about what I do. You hide behind this mysterious persona like it makes you more interesting than you actually are." Gosling let out a laugh, but there was no humor in it. It was the kind of laugh that comes from genuine disbelief, from encountering something so absurd that normal reactions fall short. "So we're doing this now? We're really doing this?" He looked directly into the camera for a moment, then back at Kimmel. "You brought me here to promote a film, Jimmy. A film that I spent 2 years of my life making, working with incredible people to tell a story that actually means something. But instead of talking about the work, you want to play amateur psychologist. Maybe because the work isn't that interesting," Kimmel shot back without missing a beat. "Maybe because you've been phoning it in for so long that even you don't know the difference between Ryan Gosling the actor and Ryan Gosling the person anymore." The accusation struck something deep in Gosling, and the change in his demeanor was immediate and unmistakable. His hands, which had been resting casually on the arms of his chair, clenched into fists. His entire body language shifted from relaxed to coiled, like a spring under pressure. "You know what your problem is, Jimmy," Gosling said, his voice dropping to almost a whisper but somehow carrying more intensity than if he had shouted. "You think that because you have a platform, because you have an audience, that gives you the right to tear people down for entertainment. You think that making someone else look small somehow makes you look bigger." Kimmel leaned forward, matching Gosling's intensity. "And you think that because you're handsome and mysterious, you don't have to actually engage with the world like the rest of us do." You think you can just coast on that whole tortured artist thing forever? Tortured artist? Gosling repeated, incredulous. Is that what you think this is about? You think I'm sitting here playing some character for you? He stood up abruptly, the sudden movement causing several audience members to gasp. Let me tell you something about being genuine, Jimmy. Being genuine means admitting when someone has crossed a line. Being genuine means standing up when someone is trying to humiliate you for cheap laughs. Kimmel remained seated, but his posture was rigid, defensive. Nobody's trying to humiliate you, Ryan. I'm trying to have a real conversation. For once, instead of the usual promotional fluff that everybody pretends to care about. A real conversation? Gosling's voice rose for the first time, and the sound echoed through the stunned studio. You call this a real conversation? Attacking someone's character, making assumptions about their personal life, trying to provoke them into giving you a viral moment for your show? This isn't conversation, Jimmy. This is exploitation. The word hung in the air like an accusation that neither man could take back. Behind the cameras, producers were frantically signaling to each other, trying to decide whether to cut to commercial or let the confrontation play out. The audience sat in complete silence, witnessing something that felt more like a private argument than television entertainment. Kimmel's face had gone from flushed to pale. Exploitation? That's what you think this is? What else would you call it? Gosling demanded, his composure completely gone now. You invite someone onto your show under the pretense of promoting their work, then spend the entire time trying to break them down psychologically. You want to know why I'm selective about interviews, Jimmy? It's because of people like you who think that just because someone is famous, they're not entitled to basic human dignity. Basic human dignity? Kimmel's voice cracked slightly. You're a millionaire movie star complaining about basic human dignity because someone asked you tough questions? These aren't tough questions, Gosling replied, his voice gaining strength. Tough questions would be about the craft, about the choices I make as an actor, about the stories I want to tell. What you're doing is personal attack disguised as journalism. You're trying to humiliate me because you think it will make good television. Kimmel stood up now, facing Gosling across the small space between their chairs. You know what I think, Ryan? I think you can't handle someone not buying into your mystique. I think you're so used to people treating you like you're special that you can't deal with someone treating you like a regular person. Regular person? Gosling's laugh was harsh now, completely devoid of any warmth. Regular people don't get ambushed on national television by someone who's supposed to be interviewing them. Regular people don't have to sit there and smile while someone tries to tear apart their personality for entertainment. The tension between them was so thick that it seemed to fill the entire studio. Crew members had stopped what they were doing to watch the confrontation unfold. The audience sat transfixed, unsure whether they should be entertained or concerned by what they were witnessing. You want to know what's really going on here, Jimmy? Gosling continued, his voice steady but filled with controlled anger. You're intimidated. You're intimidated by the fact that I don't need your approval, that I don't need to perform for you the way other guests do. And instead of respecting that, you're trying to force me into being the kind of guest that makes your job easier. Kimmel's eyes flashed with anger. Intimidated? By you? The guy who mumbles his way through every interview and acts like he's doing everyone a favor just by showing up? There it is, Gosling said, pointing at Kimmel with genuine accusation in his gesture. There's the real Jimmy Kimmel, not the friendly host who just wants to have fun conversations. The guy who resents actors for being actors, who thinks that, because he has a microphone, he gets to judge everyone else's authenticity. The confrontation had reached a fever pitch, and everyone in the studio could sense that something was about to break. The silence that followed was deafening. Both men stood facing each other across what now felt like a battlefield rather than a talk show set. The studio lights, which had seemed warm and inviting when the show began, now cast harsh shadows that emphasized the lines of tension on both their faces. Somewhere in the control room, A producer was probably screaming into their headset, but neither Gosling nor Kimmel seemed aware of anything beyond their mutual antagonism. Kimmel broke the silence first, his voice trembling with barely controlled rage. "You know what, Ryan? You're right. I am judging you. And you know why? Because I've been doing this for 20 years, and I've met hundreds of actors who actually appreciate the platform, who understand that part of being a public figure means engaging with the public. But you act like every question is beneath. You like every interaction is something you're enduring rather than participating in." Gosling's response came swift and cutting. "Maybe that's because most of the questions I get asked are beneath me, Jimmy. Maybe it's because people like you have turned celebrity interviews into a circus where the point isn't to learn anything meaningful, but to create moments that will get shared on social media. You don't want to know about my craft or my process or what drives me as an artist. You want me to dance for your audience like a trained monkey." Trained monkey? Kimmel's voice rose to a pitch that his viewers had never heard before. "You think that's what I want? I want you to be a human being, Ryan. I want you to have a conversation instead of delivering these perfectly rehearsed non-answers that your publicist probably coached you on." "My publicist?" Gosling laughed, and the sound was sharp enough to cut. "My publicist told me to come on here and be polite, to talk about the movie, to play nice with Jimmy Kimmel because he's got a big audience and good ratings. My publicist would be horrified by what's happening right now. But you know what? I'm glad it's happening. I'm glad someone finally gets to see what it's like when the mask comes off." Kimmel took a step closer, his face flushed with anger and something that looked almost like hurt. "What mask, Ryan? The mask of being a decent human being? The mask of showing up and doing your job without acting like you're being tortured?" "No, Jimmy," Gosling replied, his voice dropping to that dangerous whisper again. "The mask of pretending that this whole system isn't completely broken. The mask of pretending that what you do here has any value beyond cheap entertainment. The mask of pretending that you actually care about the people you interview instead of just using them as content for your show." The accusation struck home, and Kimmel's composure finally shattered completely. "Using them? Using them? I've given careers to people, Ryan. I've helped promote movies that wouldn't have gotten attention otherwise. I've created a platform where people can connect with their fans in ways they never could before. What have you done besides brood your way through a bunch of movies and act like the world owes you something?" "The world owes me something?" Gosling's voice was incredulous now. "Jimmy, I never asked for any of this. I never asked to be famous. I never asked to have my personal life dissected by people who don't know me. I became an actor because I love telling stories, because I believe in the power of cinema to move people and make them think and feel things they've never felt before. But somehow, that got turned into this obligation to be a performing seal for people like you." Kimmel was shaking now, whether from anger or something else entirely. "People like me? What exactly do you think people like me are, Ryan? People who've forgotten the difference between entertainment and exploitation," Gosling shot back without hesitation. "People who think that just because someone is successful, they don't deserve privacy or respect or the right to be treated like a human being instead of a commodity." The words seemed to hit Kimmel like physical blows. His face cycled through several emotions: anger, hurt, confusion, and finally something that looked almost like recognition. But instead of backing down, he doubled down. "You want to talk about being treated like a human being?" Kimmel's voice was raw now, stripped of all its television polish. "How about treating your host like a human being? How about showing up to do an interview and actually participating instead of sitting there like you're doing everyone a favor? How about acknowledging that maybe, just maybe, the people who watch this show deserve better than your condescending attitude?" "Condescending?" Gosling repeated, and for the first time, there was genuine surprise in his voice. "Jimmy, I came here to talk about a film that I care deeply about. A film that took 2 years of my life to make. A film that deals with themes of identity and authenticity, and what it means to be human in a world that's constantly trying to turn you into something you're not. And instead of talking about any of that, you decided to turn this into a therapy session where you get to play psychologist and I get to be your patient. Maybe because your films are all the same, Kimmel snapped, his filter completely gone now. Maybe because you keep making these pretentious art house movies where you play the same character over and over again, and then you act surprised when people want to know if there's actually a person behind all that manufactured mystery. The studio had gone so quiet that you could hear individual audience members breathing. What had started as a talk show interview had become something much more primal, much more real. Two men, stripped of their professional personas, engaged in a battle that felt like it had been building for years. Gosling stared at Kimmel for a long moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was deadly calm. "You know what, Jimmy? You're absolutely right about one thing. There is a person behind all this. A person who chose to become an actor because he believed in the power of storytelling. A person who has spent years trying to choose projects that matter, trying to work with filmmakers who have something to say. A person who values his privacy because he understands that mystery isn't the same thing as dishonesty. But you don't want to meet that person. You want to tear him down because it makes better television." "Better television," Kimmel's voice cracked. "You think I'm enjoying this? You think I wanted this to happen?" "I think you created this," Gosling replied, his composure returning as Kimmel's continued to deteriorate. "I think you came into this interview with an agenda. I think you decided ahead of time that you were going to try to crack the enigmatic Ryan Gosling, and when I didn't play along, when I didn't give you the reaction you wanted, you kept pushing, and pushing until you got something you could use." Kimmel opened his mouth to respond, but Gosling wasn't finished. "And you know what the really sad part is, Jimmy? If you had just asked me about the work, if you had shown even the slightest interest in what I'm actually here to talk about, you might have gotten the conversation you claim you wanted. You might have seen the person you say you're looking for. But instead, you chose to make this about your own insecurities, about your need to prove that you can break down anyone who sits in that chair." The accusation hung in the air between them, and for a moment, Kimmel looked genuinely stricken. But then his face hardened again, and his voice came out as little more than a growl. "Get out!" Gosling blinked, surprised by the sudden shift. "What?" "I said get out," Kimmel repeated louder this time. "Get off my show. Get out of my studio. I don't need to listen to this anymore." The audience gasped audibly. In all the years of Jimmy Kimmel Live, nothing like this had ever happened. Guests had walked out before, but never after being told to leave by the host himself. Gosling looked around the studio, taking in the shocked faces of the audience, the panicked expressions of the crew members, the cameras that were still rolling, despite the complete breakdown of normal television protocol. When he looked back at Kimmel, there was something almost like pity in his expression. "You know what, Jimmy?" he said quietly. "I actually feel sorry for you, because you had a chance tonight to have a real conversation with someone who might have surprised you. Instead, you chose to turn it into this circus. And the worst part is, you're going to go back to your dressing room and convince yourself that I'm the problem, that I'm the one who ruined your show." Kimmel's face was purple now, his hands shaking with rage. "Get out!" Gosling nodded slowly, his composure completely intact now. "I'm going, Jimmy. But before I do, I want everyone watching to understand something. This, right here, this is what happens when authenticity meets artifice. This is what happens when someone who's built their career on keeping things real meets someone who's built their career on keeping things fake. And the audience gets to decide which one they prefer." He turned to face the cameras directly, speaking to the viewers at home with the same intensity he brought to his most powerful film performances. "I came here tonight to talk about a movie that I believe in, a story that I think is worth telling. Instead, I got ambushed by someone who thinks that tearing people down makes for good entertainment. I hope you got what you came for, Jimmy. I hope this gives you the ratings you wanted." With that, Gosling walked off the set, leaving Kimmel standing alone in front of his stunned audience, the cameras still rolling, capturing what would undoubtedly become one of the most talked about moments in late-night television history.